Welcome to the International Conference, Make the North a Zone of Peace. My name is Johanna, and I have the great honor to introduce speakers from Norway, Finland, Britain, Germany, and the United States. I am mostly very honored to be able to introduce myself as the granddaughter of Agneta. Our Russian speaker, Professor Vladimir Kosin, could unfortunately not be with us today, but he sends all his best regards to all of you and his apologies. The conference is in English, but you will find all these speeches from our speakers translated into Swedish in this booklet that you all have, I hope. If not, they're right outside on a little table. Our gathering today is arranged by the Swedish Peace Council and Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. This entire conference is live streamed as we speak on YouTube, and it is also recorded and available for sharing via social media such as Facebook, or you can copy the links in emails and pass it on and just share as widely and as you can and want to.
What is the YouTube channel?
That is a good question.
This one. So YouTube and then Media Continente. Media Continente. And you see that live, I think it says live now, or Can you repeat that?
Live now? Was that the...
Yeah,
Media Continente. Media Continente.
Media Continente?
Mm-hmm.
Live now?
Yeah, you click live now.
No, but you have to know Media Continente. You have to write a keyword Media Continente in the YouTube search.
Okay,
yes.
Media Continente. Write that in the space for where you search for things at YouTube, and hopefully this will be available for access. All right then. And after every speech that's going to be held today, there will be a window for questions. So there will be time for if there's anything that needs to be clarified and whatnot. We will also have a lunch break between 12:30 to 1:45 p.m. But before I'll hand over the stage to our speakers, I would like to present Women for Peace from Kiruna. Welcome.
Good morning, all. Nice to see you. So many people here, that is very nice. My name is Eva Jonsson. I have here Edla Lanto and Gunbritt Läktaro. We are all from Kiruna. We represent the group Women for Peace that we have in Kiruna, and those of you who came to Kiruna in 2013, you know that what we are here for is to continue what we started 3.5 years ago in Kiruna. So we are very happy to be here, we are happy to see you, and we think that this is going to be a great day. And as we are all fighting for the same things, I think that we are probably going to have a lot of experiences from all over the world to share. Okay, have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our first speaker, Bruce Gagnon from the United States. He is the founder of Global Network and a well-traveled man, giving speeches and highlighting the dangerous global policy on both ground and space. His theme is, "We don't want war with Russia." Please welcome Bruce Gagnon.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
What a great pleasure it is to be here with you all. Just seemed like a few hours ago I was in a courtroom in my hometown of Bath, Maine. 12 of us were charged with obstructing a public way when last June at a christening ceremony at the shipyard in our town called Bath Iron Works, christening of a new Zumwalt stealth destroyer whose job will be to sneak up on Russia and China and blast them with what are called new electromagnetic rail guns that can fire a shell more than 60 miles. The shells, though, well, let me say, after the ship left Bath, it broke down twice. Once just soon after it left, and the other when it was trying to pass through the Panama Canal. They had to tow it. Now this ship cost more than $4 billion. That's with a B. And but the shells, they discovered, will cost $800,000 for one shell. $800,000 a piece. So suddenly, the fiscal crisis of America is reeling its head, and the plans of the Navy have been, how could you say, messed up. So anyway, we were found guilty in this yesterday. I learned this last night after I arrived. The judge, surprisingly but very kindly, allowed me to leave the trial while it was still going on to make this trip here. But we were found guilty. And
You have to stay here now.
I think I'm going to have to stay here. So if anyone is out there would like to take me in, please see me afterwards. Let me introduce myself a bit before I continue. I grew up in an Air Force family. My father was in the Air Force. And we moved frequently, living in England and Germany, and then all over the United States, different parts of the country. And then in 1971, I myself tried to join the Air Force. I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be a career military man. I grew up behind the barbed wire fences. My mind was colonized, and so it was very natural for me to want to join the military. But it was, I flunked my induction physical because of an old high school football injury. So at a time when most people my age were trying to stay out of the military, like my friend Andre back here, who lives in Malmo and came from Massachusetts and Maine to Sweden. Unlike people like him, I was trying to get in. So I had to get a waiver to get into the military. And after my training, I was sent to a war base in California where the planes would fly to Vietnam and bring the soldiers. And when they would return, they would bring the body bags of the dead soldiers. So there was lots of anti-war activity at my base. So it was there that I became a peace activist, and I've been one ever since. That was 1971. In 1983, I began working on space issues, and in 1992, I became a co-founder of the Global Network. So this year, it's the 25th anniversary of our organization, and we are pleased to say that all over the world, groups are taking more seriously the links between US and NATO war preparations with Russia and China, and the use of space technology. But space technology now is absolutely fundamentally instrumental in directing all US and NATO military operations. In 2013, the Global Network held its annual meeting in Kiruna, and we learned much about how northern Sweden is being used by US and NATO to develop a large space technology center that is being aimed at Russia. Sadly, not enough people in Sweden or other Nordic nations know about these expensive and provocative developments. Over the years, the Global Network has traveled to many places around the world where space technology is being set up to give the US control and domination of the planet on behalf of corporate interests We've been to the Space Command headquarters in Colorado and to the headquarters of Strategic Command in Nebraska. Strategic Command is now in charge of virtually everything in the military: cyber warfare, nuclear weapons, space, everything. We've gone to Cape Canaveral in Florida, where I got my start right before the 1997 launch of the Cassini mission that carried 72 pounds of deadly plutonium-238 into the heavens. We've been up to Menwith Hill and Yorkshire Dales in England, where the US NSA spy base is located. And we've been to South Korea repeatedly in the last few years, where the Pentagon is deploying so-called missile defense aimed at China. And we've even gone to Bath, Maine, where I live, and protested at the shipyard where these destroyers for the Navy are built, and they are being outfitted with missile defense systems, which are also now being used to surround Russia and China. Last year, we went to Japan, to a seaside community that now has a US missile defense radar to help target China. And in late 2016, several of us, including Dave Webb from the Global Network, traveled to India to participate in a conference organized by our board member in that country, as the US tries now to bring India on side in the build-up to war with China. In April, this coming April, we're going to Huntsville, Alabama for our 25th annual Space Organizing Conference. Huntsville is the place where the Nazi rocket scientists were brought after World War II, those that created the V-1 and the V-2 rockets, Werner von Braun and his team of 100 scientists. They were brought to the United States to create the US space program. And today Huntsville is the directorate for the Pentagon's missile defense program. It's never easy to go to any of these places, particularly in the United States, because there are always people who would rather you didn't draw attention to what is happening in their community. Even many peace activists in these communities would rather be what I call out-of-town peace activists. They'd rather go to Washington or New York and join protests because in their own community you pay a price. The less attention, the better. Many times friends or family work at these places and people don't want to ruffle any feathers as our economy increasingly in America becomes militarized and addicted to military spending. Many years ago in 1983, I was organizing protests outside the Pershing II nuclear missile factory in Orlando, Florida, while my youngest sister was inside working on the circuit boards for that rocket that was eventually deployed in Muttlangen, Germany during the Pershing and cruise missile deployments that Ronald Reagan did in '83. I'm sure many of you were involved in those protests at that time. It was at the height of the Cold War, but we got through that period thanks to the massive mobilization, peace mobilization around the world. And today we're heading right back into a new Cold War, and the peace movement this time around is not so aware and not quite so active. And this must change quickly. In the US today, 55% of every federal discretionary tax dollar goes to the military to fund this cancerous war machine. Our communities, as I said, are increasingly addicted to military spending. There's virtually no money for anything else available as we witness austerity cuts in social programs like is happening in so many other places around the globe. What does it say about the soul of America that we have to keep killing people around the world so that workers can have jobs to feed their families?
To make weapons.
Some years ago, the Pentagon said that under corporate globalization of the world economy, every country will have a different role. They said that in America, we won't have traditional manufacturing jobs anymore. because it's cheaper to make shoes and televisions and cell phones and clothes and even cars in other countries with cheaper labor. The Pentagon said that our role in the United States under corporate globalization will be security export. So it has come to pass that the #1 industrial export product of America today is indeed weapons. And when weapons are your top industrial export of your nation, what is your global marketing strategy for that product line? We are very happy that the award-winning journalist Bård Wormdal is here today, author of The Satellite War. He was with us in Kiruna. His book is very important because he reveals the truth about how the Nordic nations have become instrumental in the entire space-directed warfighting program of the US and NATO. He's taken a story that was largely hidden and brought it to light for all to see. We are very grateful for his determination and hard work to share this crucial story. Thank you, Bård. All war today on this planet is directed using space technology. The Persian Gulf War that began in the early 90s was called the first space war by the Pentagon, because at that time the Space Command field tested their new space technology system. Before that war began, the Space Command pre-identified all of Saddam Hussein's military targets using military satellites. And in the first 2 to 3 days of the war, 95% of those targets were bombed. The war was essentially over at that point, but dragged on for weeks. And during those remaining days, the Pentagon launched 100 cruise missiles, costing $1 million apiece, and used up a lot of other military hardware that kept production lines humming around the clock back at home. But most importantly, the Space Command was learning how to tie all warfare together, whether it was ground-based, sea-based, or air-based, into the Space Command system. It was out of this field test of the program that the slogan "full spectrum dominance" emerged. The idea was that space technology would direct all warfare on the planet at every level of conflict, and that the US would not allow any other country to achieve that capability. So today, drones buzzing over Afghanistan, Pakistan, Niger, or Yemen are flown by pilots back in the United States at bases like Creech Air Force Base in Nevada or Hancock Airfield in New York. This is possible because of the military satellites in orbit. They link the pilot to the drone in real time, split-second time. The Space Command downlink ground stations spread around the world help relay those signals. The US base at Ramstein in Germany plays a key role in this process. The Pentagon brags that this space-directed warfare increases the kill chain. In a way, you could call the military satellites the triggers that make the drone kills possible. These satellites allow the military to see everything, to hear everything, and to target every place on the planet. The Space Command appears to have 3 primary missions today. First, to provide global surveillance, the eyes and ears of corporate control. Secondly, Pentagon power projection using space technologies. And thirdly, to create the capability to control the pathway on and off the planet Earth. NASA, with our tax dollars, and even some of yours, continues to develop the necessary technologies to successfully mine the sky for precious resources. We've already seen Obama privatize some aspects of the space program as the technology matures, after the taxpayers paid the startup costs. The plan ultimately is for full privatization of space mining operations, with the Space Command ensuring control of the pathway to outer space on behalf of particular corporate interests. All of this will be very expensive to build and operate. For the years, the Pentagon has been saying that Star Wars, the military space technology program, will be the largest industrial project in the history of our planet. Even after the US government, now under control of the corporations, cuts what little social programs we have left in America, the Pentagon still needs more money to pay for this operation. The US and NATO member nations are today working hard to integrate their space technology systems. This is called interoperability. Everything that the NATO members do has to fit into the US space technology program, because the Pentagon needs the allies to help pay for this very expensive program. And that's why we're hearing the recent pressure for the European countries to up their contributions to NATO. But have no doubt that even though NATO partners and NATO members help pay for these military space programs, the US intends to stay in control of the tip of the spear. Recent US-NATO war games in Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Romania, and Bulgaria are contributing to a new arms race in space. In 2014, the US supported and directed the coup d'etat in Ukraine, and this indicates that the current strategy is to destabilize the regions along the Russian border, with the ultimate goal being regime change in Moscow. In 2016, the US built a new missile defense base in Romania, and this year a similar missile defense base will be constructed in Poland. The radar to help direct these interceptor missiles has already been deployed in Turkey. Russia rightly contends that these systems can be used to intercept their retaliatory capability after a US first strike attack or the missile defense launchers in Romania and Poland could fire offensive cruise missiles. So it could be used to either be the shield to take out the Russian retaliatory capability after a US first strike attack, or these missile defense deployments in Romania and Poland could fire offensive cruise missiles. Their operational range is up to 2,400 kilometers. The missile's flight time to the Russia's western border would be less than 10 minutes. Under the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, the ABM treaty between the United States and Russia, these kinds of so-called missile defense systems were not allowed because they would give one side an advantage over the other. They were destabilizing. They were provocative. But in 2001, soon after moving into the White House, George W. Bush pulled the United States out of that treaty, and since that time, the US missile defense deployments have been on steroids. NATO stepped up its intelligence activity along Russia's perimeter. In 10 years, the total number of flights by NATO reconnaissance aircraft near the Russian border has almost tripled. And in the southwest of the country, it's 8 times more. For comparison, in the 1990s, there were 107 flights. In the 2000s, 298 flights. And in 2016, 852 NATO reconnaissance flights along the Russian border. In the United States, a program has been implemented to modernize the nuclear bombs in their storage sites in Europe. About 200 of the updated American weapons are now deployed in Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. The Republican-controlled government in the United States is now talking about putting orbiting battle stations in space that could fire projectiles down to Earth in a first strike attack. It's often been called rods from God. The U.S. Space Command each year holds a first strike computer war game simulation aimed at China and Russia. How are China and Russia to respond when they see the U.S. military expansion right up to their borders and hear of plans to put offensive weapons into space? Under the Trump government, more money will be directed at protecting U.S. satellites from attack, potentially including systems that can ram into or otherwise disable other countries' satellites. Representative Trent Franks, an Arizona Republican on the House Armed Services Committee, recently said, "In every area of warfare within the Geneva Convention, America should be second to none. That includes satellite warfare, if it's necessary. We cannot be victims," he said, "of our own decency." Yeah, have a good laugh over that one. Russia and China have been trying for years to get the United States to agree to negotiate a new treaty called the Prevention of an Arms Race in Outer Space. But all U.S. administrations since Ronald Reagan have blocked the process at the United Nations. It would be wise for the people living in the Nordic region to refuse to follow the U.S. war machine over the cliff. Sadly, many governments and citizens in this part of the world are falling for the anti-Russian rhetoric coming from Washington and the corporate-controlled media. And it's the same story in my country. Sadly, far too many citizens and politicians are falling for the bullshit. Why does the U.S. war machine want regime change in Moscow? Could it be because Russia has the largest supply of natural gas on our planet? Could it be because of climate change and the melting ice in the Arctic Sea? The fossil fuel industry is excited about drilling for oil where ice once existed year-round. What nation on earth has the largest land border with the Arctic? The militarization of everything around us is a spiritual sickness. Native American holy man Lame Deer talked about how the white man was blinded by his love for the dollar bill, the paper money. His spiritual connection to the Mother Earth is broken. We do have a big problem in the world today, and it's called climate change. When I left home in Maine, that traditionally by this time of year we have this much snow on the ground. Now we have virtually nothing, and our temperatures have been the warmest in the history of the planet. Instead of wasting our resources on building expensive weapon systems for endless war that only benefit the corporations, all nations, and particularly ours in America, should be working together to deal with climate change. As we in the global network talk about space issues, we always call for the conversion of the military-industrial complex so that we can have an internationally coordinated response to the coming harsh reality of global warming. This will not happen unless we repeatedly demand and organize globally to make it happen. We've all had enough war. It's time for us to move toward sanity, peace, and sustainability. The Earth is just a tiny little satellite flying through space. Our challenge is to develop the necessary consciousness and peaceful culture to survive this journey. Viewing our Mother Earth and the vastness of space as sacred will help us plant a good seed that will flourish in time. Thank you very much for inviting me here today.
Thank you for that. Is there anyone who has any questions? Feel free to raise your hand and speak up.
No, I just wondered, do you think Trump will change this in any way? He say he wants America to be more, US to be more isolationistic, but or what have he done a lot so far? Has he? But he will put maybe more money in the satellite system, or do you know anything more detailed about this?
Trump has said that our military is weak and needs more money. I think Trump is really hard to read. He has no core values. He changes from day to day. He's very unpredictable. One of a man that was a colonel in the Army and became Colin Powell's chief of staff, his name is Lawrence Wilkerson. He was a Republican. I recently saw in a video, he was saying that the Republican Party is not at all united. It's very divided. They control the House and the Senate and the presidency. I think it's going to be a very crazy, crazy time. I say the only really, well, I will say it was a good thing that Trump said that the United States will not go forward with the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Trade Deal. That was a good thing. Outside of that, I think it's going to be difficult to find too many things. But I think there will be one good thing that Trump does do for the world, and particularly for America. And it will be to end the illusion that America is the exceptional nation. And hopefully it will make it easier for people like you to convince your fellow citizens not to follow the United States over the cliff. Because look at the madness that exists within our country. I must say that our country is, as you've probably long ago figured out, a very sick country. And the Christian fundamentalists have now really taken power. I'm not in favor of impeaching Trump, as many people on the left are already calling for impeachment after only like 2 weeks, because Pence is a real crazy dude. He's a total Christian fundamentalist. And these are people that, you know, are eager to have the final Armageddon, because it means that the return of Christ will come sooner and everything. So it's really crazy. These are the people essentially in power now.
Can't they claim corporate insanity and put them into hospitals?
Put them in a hospital.
Yeah, corporate insanity.
Well, they do have a big
diagnosis.
Psychiatric hospital in Washington. It's called the United States Capitol. So we try to keep them contained there, but unfortunately they're able to make decisions that kind of bleed out from there. So, emphasis on bleed. Any other questions maybe or comments? Yes.
Hello, I'm Kerstin from Webb. I'm following a little bit what is happening in the US through the Facebook, and of course many of you can see that there is a lot of actions taking place with women's marches and so on, and that seems to be spreading, and that I feel is good. But do you see the same development when it comes to the peace movement in the US? Because I think that is where the waking up is needed, and what can we do to support?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There's a lot you can do. A lot of women, I think the women's organizing is really fabulous. It's very important. And the issues that they're talking about are really crucial, because there's no doubt about it that the fundamentalists want to take women back a long way in terms of abortion and other issues. But we're not going to defeat this corporate government. You know, Mussolini called fascism the wedding of corporations and government, and that's what we have in the United States, and I think in many other countries around the world. We're not going to defeat this unless we're very united, both in the United States and all over the world. So we must really integrate our organizing. I've long been saying that currently, traditionally, in the United States, progressive organizations use the business model. Every man for himself, every organization for themselves, right? Every dog eating the other dog, competing with each other for money and media contacts and supporters, and that kind of thing has to die. We have to integrate and work together in order to create a mass movement and a mass consciousness. So what you could do is, with the friends that you know on Facebook or other places in America, particularly women that are organizing events, ask them to begin to talk about the military issue, to integrate that, and help them begin to see that there will be no social programs that most women organizations support, obviously, because of the military budget, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Environmental groups are reluctant to talk about the fact that the Pentagon has the largest carbon footprint on the Earth. And in fact, the Kyoto Protocols, the United States would not sign them unless the military was exempted from reporting their carbon bootprint, and that was again ratified in Paris more recently. So environmental groups don't want to talk about that. The biggest polluter on the planet, the military. And so those of you that are in contact with environmental groups in the United States, please urge them to also make those connections. So that's the struggle the peace movement currently is facing in the United States, is to try to get other groups to deal with these things. But let's find out what's the reason that they're so reluctant. Women's organizations, environmental groups, etc. What's the reason they're so reluctant? And again, we come back to the addiction to military production in so many communities. There are communities in America, for example, Huntsville, Alabama, that I talked about earlier, is called the Pentagon of the South. Its entire economy is military. And so people in those communities, good liberals, you know, good environmentalists, good women's rights organizers, don't want to go near the military issue because it's just far too controversial. And they feel that it would interrupt their important work in their issue area. So this is a real challenge for us.
I think it is.
Okay, thank you.
Chair of Global Network from Leeds, Britain, I give you Dave Webb, President of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament in the UK and former professor at Leeds Metropolitan University. Today he will speak about the US-NATO encirclement of Russia as a threat to peace. Please welcome.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So first of all, I want to thank you. Well, thank you for coming. It's good to see so many people here, and thank you for the organisers for putting all this together. I know what a job it can be to organise these kind of things, and also especially to thank Agneta, who suggested the idea of a Nordic peace zone, which is a brilliant idea. In fact, it should be extended to cover the whole of Europe. And that's mainly because of the massive military exercises that are constantly being staged there by the US and NATO. The most recent being Operation Atlantic Resolve. Let me see if I can get this to work. Yeah. In which thousands of troops and military vehicles arrived in Germany from the US, where they were joined by over 1,000 other vehicles from storage facilities in the Netherlands. These military units then moved out across Eastern Europe for exercises with NATO allies there and in the Baltic region. Since the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, the US has also established military bases in many ex-Soviet Union countries: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland and Hungary, where it also frequently carries out war training exercise activities. These exercises are not reported by Western media, which instead reports continuously of a threat from Russia. And then of course there's NATO. Last year, just a few weeks before the NATO summit in Warsaw, one of the largest NATO exercises since the end of the Cold War took place in Western Poland, called Anaconda 16. Around 30,000 troops and numerous vehicles, aircraft and ships from over 20 countries were involved in this massive show of force. The 10-day exercise came at the same time as a sharp deterioration in relations between Russia and NATO. Moscow criticized the exercises and commented that the war games do not contribute to the atmosphere of trust and safety on the continent. NATO continues to drive military spending and promote military intervention and posturing as a way to keep the peace. And we have learned in Britain from the Chilcot inquiry about the Iraq War and Britain's involvement that the reasons given for going to war must always be challenged. We have to continually do that and insist on alternatives to the military. And that's one of the things we did also in Warsaw. The peace movement held its own protests and its own counter-summit there at the same time as NATO. NATO is also, of course, very active in Scandinavia. In February and March last year, NATO held its annual 2 weeks of high-intensity operations in central Norway called Exercise Cold Response 2016. This included land, sea and air mobilizations with military contributions from 12 NATO members and 2 partner nations. 15,000 troops took part, and an increasing frequency of these exercises has led to the US establishing storage depots for tanks and amphibious assault vehicles in Norway. NATO's military exercises are undoubtedly designed to show Russia what the West is prepared to do to ensure access to new sea routes and new resources that become available as the Arctic ice recedes due to climate change. And so it goes on. Last July, the Swedish government signed up an agreement allowing NATO to operate more easily on Swedish territory for exercises or in the event of war. In September, Sweden announced that it was remilitarizing the island of Gotland, halfway between Sweden and Latvia in the middle of the Baltic Sea. A permanent garrison is to be established there, or re-established there, in April. Previously, in November 2015, Sweden's Skaraborg Regiment and Wartofta Tank Company carried out an exercise in the Gotland archipelago. And there are calls for NATO also to militarize the Åland Islands, a group of Finnish islands which have been demilitarized since the Treaty of Paris ended the Crimean War in 1856. An unofficial agreement between Denmark and the Soviet Union that Bornholm Island would not be used by NATO is also under threat. Although it was briefly occupied by the Soviet Union at the end of World War II,
it was returned to Denmark in 1946. This September, Aurora 2017 will be the largest military exercise in Sweden in more than 20 years. The US will be practicing how to move troops from Trondheim in Norway to Sweden in the event of escalating military tensions in the Baltic region. An advanced guard of US Marines are already being established in Trondheim.
You speak louder, closer to the mic, please.
Sorry. But warfighting is not just about troops and tanks. Today, as we've heard from Bruce, today the military depends on space power. Military commanders and decision makers require information and control. Information about targets, troop movements, the weather, and so on. And control of the movement of military components like ships, tanks, personnel, drones, etc. And today, military operations are informed and controlled through satellite systems. In theory, space systems provide for the command and control of all branches of the military, allowing them to operate with precision and in a coordinated way. Global surveillance and photo reconnaissance are also used for planning and to provide opportunities for the military to locate, monitor, track and target any groups or individuals of interest. In 2013, as Bruce has already said, the Global Network annual meeting was held in Kiruna to draw attention to Sweden's growing involvement in NATO war exercises, satellite communications and advanced weapons testing. Kiruna Station is used extensively by the European Space Agency, with routine operations being fully automated and controlled from the European Space Operations Centre in Darmstadt, Germany. Many of these operations are supported or provided by Swedish companies and the Swedish government and help to support the military and hegemonic interests of the US and NATO. While in Kiruna, we were also visited the S-Range Space Centre, part of the North European Aerospace Test Range, or NEAT, covering 24,000 square kilometres in northern Sweden. NEAT is Europe's largest testing area for aerospace systems and also includes the Vidsel drone and missile test range. The world's largest satellite receiving station is at S-Range, through which the military funnels huge amounts of data. While there, we were able to demonstrate our disapproval. In 2015, some of us went to Sicily. Well, actually, it was Bruce and me, to support the protest against another part of the global military system at Nisemny, and which was one of the 4 relay stations used by the United States Navy's Mobile User Objective System, or MUOS, a narrowband tactical satellite communication system designed to improve ground communications for US forces. The local opposition there is large, active and angry, and very well organised.
We have to do the same.
Exactly, we have to do the same everywhere. MUOS is due to provide faster data transfer and broadband connection via satellite systems similar to those used in smartphones. And in 2013, the connection here with the north, Sicily being in the south, or at least in the Mediterranean, in 2013, Lockheed Martin demonstrated that it was possible through MUOS to extend Arctic communications almost to the North Pole. This is probably the most northerly successful call to a geosynchronous satellite and demonstrates the importance of the system to the military operating in the far north. The Arctic is also an important region for receiving satellite signals, as the high latitude means that information can be downloaded for all of the daily passes of military or polar orbiting satellites. Bruce already has mentioned the importance of Bård Wormdal's work, and he showed us in Kiruna in 2013 how the satellite receiving station established by the US and Norway on the island of Svalbard was being used for military purposes, violating the 1920 Treaty of Svalbard between Russia and Norway, which strictly forbids military operations of any kind from being carried out on the island. The US military is therefore encircling the globe in space and on the ground with satellite and computer network systems. The global network Keep Space for Peace Week 2016 focused on the US military chokehold on Russia and China and included a number of European and Scandinavian events in Britain, Germany, Italy, Sweden and Norway. One of the activities was a conference held in Vadsø in the northern tip of Norway, close to Vardø, which is home to a large US Space Command radar station within easy reach of Russia. The conference explored, I'm really sad I missed the conference, I couldn't go, but I'm really sorry that I didn't. The conference explored, among other things, the gathering and sharing of signals intelligence, or SIGINT, and communications intelligence, or COMINT, between Norway and the NSA since 1952. These electronic intelligence gathering systems are used extensively and continuously before, during and after military operations. In the same week in the south of England, a rally was held at the US base at Croughton, a relay centre for the CIA, which was named in leaked documents as playing a really key support role in embassy-based spying. Data from the network of US embassy spy posts, such as those implicated in eavesdropping on Angela Merkel's mobile phone, are channeled to Washington through this facility. In 2013, a secure fibre optic link was laid between Croughton and the US airbase at Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti to coordinate drone strikes over the Yemen. And in 2014, the US announced it was to spend £200 million on upgrading the intelligence facilities at the base to provide, I quote, world-class combat support for activities including global strike operations. Two other Keep Space for Peace events were held in the north of England, one at the US spy base at Menwith Hill and the other at the Missile Defence Radar at Fylingdales. Both of these bases are important components in the US global military system. Menwith Hill is a huge US NSA National Reconnaissance Office base with surveillance, drone operation, missile defence and military intelligence functions. Fylingdales is a US-UK ballistic missile early warning system and a US space surveillance and missile defence radar facility. In September last year, the online investigative journal The Intercept revealed that NSA documents provided by Edward Snowden showed that intelligence gathered through satellite technology at Menwith Hill helped the US with targeted killings. Advanced surveillance programs used there have located, I quote, suspected terrorists accessing the internet in remote parts of the world, unquote, and, quote again, provided support for conventional British and American military operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, unquote. The UK and the US governments work together in order to maintain lucrative arms sales and aid Saudi Arabia and its serious breaches of international law in the Yemen. The UK government has misled Parliament by denying its role in these illegal operations, and for centuries the primary function of the British state has basically been to aid British companies in getting hold of other countries' resources. This means initiating war, military interventions, threats, bullying and other aggressive actions. In some ways, we have taught the US all that they know and all that they are doing today. The US is doing the same, but it's on a much larger scale. And it has established 800 or so military bases around the world, as Agneta is always reminding us, to further its empirical reach. This global imperialism is dressed up in propaganda as countering terrorism or improving world security or working with our allies, and similar pieties propagated by the mainstream media. Britain is complicit in appalling acts of violence while proclaiming its supposed desire for peace and security. And of course, Scandinavia is also involved. Sweden is an important part of the global information gathering network, with listening posts at Lörkill, south of Gothenburg, and the island of Löven, where we went yesterday on a visit, thanks to the organisers for that too, not far from here in Stockholm. Electronic signals are also intercepted from a ship operated by the Swedish Navy and 2 Gulfstream aircraft operated by the Swedish Air Force. In addition, Sweden controls the fibre optic cables through the Eastern Sea and has a third-party agreement in surveillance with Five Eyes, the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand and Canada intelligence gathering and sharing agreement formed in 1949. In 2008,